Hello and welcome to the Exam Study Expert podcast. And for regular listeners, it's great to be back with you again. Thank you for bearing with me during the slight hiatus in normal service over the past few weeks while I was working through an unusually intense patch of time on the home front. As I implied in my last update episode, I do all I can through thick and thin to keep the lights on here on the show and keep putting out regular content for you each week. But unfortunately, things just transpired over the past few weeks to make that goal impossible, no matter how important that goal is to me. And so I was left with no choice but to pause broadcasting for a brief patch. Thank you so much to regular listeners for bearing with me through that. And I am delighted to be resuming normal service once again. Life is good, everything's okay, and it's a beautiful day, particularly because I have your company today here on the show as the podcast gets underway once more. I've even treated myself to a snazzy new little microphone for the podcast. I thought after 5 years and close on 200 episodes and reaching hundreds of thousands of listeners around the world now, it was high time we had an upgrade to the cheap little thing I have been using from day one. And so I've got a slightly upgraded model coming to you today, and I hope you enjoy the improved audio experience on the podcast going forward. So today's episode is all about why study smarter. Why study smarter? There are two big reasons I wanted to do this episode. First, in many ways, it sets out the case for the entire existence of this podcast, setting out what I actually want to help you with. And so it's a pretty important episode for us to do, and not before time either. And it felt especially apt to recommence regular episodes with this topic after the little hiatus we have had the past few weeks. Note that the title is Why Study Smarter. Similar in name to past episodes about why study. It's a little bit different though, because why study smarter is about what's in it for you in learning to be more effective in your study methods, which is a little bit different to the past themes we've done on why study at all, where we're simply looking at the reasons we want to study and meet our academic goals in a bid to build that motivation to study. Today's episode assumes we already have that motivation, we want to do well, and it's really about the majority of what we talk about here on the podcast, that is to say, the power of taking your study strategy to the next level and why that can make such a big difference. And the second and another big reason I wanted to talk about this today is that it serves as a really nice platform on which to build the little mini series I have coming for you over the next few weeks, which is effectively going to be a start to finish audio course. I haven't quite decided how many episodes yet, probably around about 4 episodes on how to use what I consider the most effective learning strategy of all. Some of the next few episodes are going to be brand new material in which I'm updating some of the kind of the classic How to Study Effectively series from years back on the podcast with my latest thinking and tips and tricks that I have not yet shared on the podcast before. So some very important things I want to update on. And then other parts of it will simply be gathering together advice that already exists scattered throughout the podcast archives and putting it in a coherent, in order, start to finish, course-style experience over several episodes, such that a complete beginner to studying smarter could tune in from episode 1 of the series next week with absolutely no prior knowledge expected and go through to the final episode of the series and get everything they need to know in the course of those episodes to master studying really, really effectively in practice. Today's episode I kind of consider to be not really a part 1, more of a kind of a part 0 to that course, a sort of a preliminary discussion on why that course is going to be so important, as well as why the rest of the podcast we talk about is so important as well, and why the things we teach can have such high impact for you. So let's take a look. What is the case for studying smarter? I'm going to break this down into 2 big segments. So I'm going to firstly talk about the 3 main reasons I see for why studying smarter makes such a big difference. And then at the end, I'll address some of the common doubts and challenges that I often hear from people if they're kind of hesitating for any reason when they first learn about effective study strategies. And some of the perfectly understandable questions that often come up when people start to discover this stuff for the first time. So let's dive in. Let's get the most obvious reason to study smarter out of the way first. It's to help you land the best results in your exams and assignments that you possibly can. So whatever you're aiming for, the A or A star, the 9, the 95%, the 4.0, the first class, the magna cum laude, this distinction, or simply that straight up pass to get you in the door to the next step in your journey. Having the right approach to your learning has a huge impact. And this is not just my opinion. I've got the data to prove it. Back in 2015, John Hattie and colleagues did a stonkingly enormous review of many hundreds of separate studies that had been done by researchers over the years to try and answer the perennial question of why do some people score higher in exams than others? What factors explain the variance in academic performance and why some students end up doing better and others doing less well? Is it down to their teachers, their home environment, their peer group? All of these factors matter, but by far the thing that made the biggest difference were the student factors. So a full 50% of the variance in academic outcomes is explained by student factors. And that 50% is twice as much as the next most important group of factors, which, if you're wondering, are the teacher factors, which explain 25% of the variance. So 25% of your result, on average, aggregated over, literally millions actually of students in this piece of research. On average, 25% of your performance is due to kind of teacher factors, 50% is due to student factors. Some of you are self-studying, of course, in which case the picture is going to be even more skewed towards the factors that are in your control. So what do student factors actually mean? Well, it covers a range of things. We've got things like work ethic and consistent approach to learning in there, but also, and crucially, it includes many of the things we talk about on this podcast a lot. Your approach to learning and using those evidence-based study strategies to learn smarter and make faster progress in your learning. And for what it's worth, my own opinion is bang aligned with the research community's findings. And this is an opinion that has been very, very hard formed from literally thousands and thousands of hours of teaching students at all stages how to study smarter, helping them optimize their learning strategy for their circumstances. I've seen it time and time again, whether with a bad strategy, a bad study strategy, an ineffective study strategy, success is certainly still possible. People do absolutely fine, even with ineffective strategy. But the results you're looking for don't land anywhere near as reliably, and it will take more work. Given everything, if everything else is equal, it'll take much more work to get you the results you're looking for. But with a good approach to learning, success becomes far more inevitable. It becomes a much higher chance you'll get the results you're looking for, and you'll be able to do it in a more time-efficient way. One of the reasons I think I have such a great success rate as an exam coach with students who've failed an exam in the past, even a super hard exam like medical or vet med boards, tried several times in the past, students often find they have success when they start working with me. Very often find they have success when they start working with me, even with a track record of failure. It is simply because I help students find that whole new level of efficiency in their learning methods. Even if they're sort of familiar with some of the basic principles before, with that well-tuned study strategy, the success comes time after time. And I've seen the journey literally hundreds of times, enough that, I'd be an idiot not to recognize the pattern. That study strategy really does make the difference. It really does flip the switch, and it really does unlock the results for people. There's lots and lots of great advice on the podcast, particularly coming up over the next few weeks on how to do that. But if you want the shortcut and you want to get my help directly, it's examstudyexpert.com/coaching if you want to work with me one-on-one and help shortcut your way to success. And I absolutely love what I do. It's my day job, helping people with their study strategy. And as I say, I've had a lot of success with that. So examstudyexpert.com/coaching if you want to get a little bit of help for yourself. So the first reason then, studying smarter helps us to score higher and dramatically improves your chance of landing the results you are looking for. And running throughout that first reason and our conversation around it has been a little bit of a hint, more than a hint really, at our second reason, and that's the time-saving aspect of it. I'm a huge believer in studying smarter, not harder. That means working with effective strategies. That's the studying smarter bit, and not studying too hard. In other words, no burning the midnight oil. We get our work done and we do so consistently, steadily, and we keep the balance. That is not only a more pleasant less stressful way to prepare for a big exam, but it's also intrinsically interwoven back with that first goal of maximising your performance. Because if you end up going into that final exam exhausted and burned out from weeks or months of super long hours and missed sleep, you're going to be at a disadvantage in that exam compared to someone who's a bit fresher, having worked a more balanced schedule and still has some gas in the tank going into their exam. And once again, this second factor about saving you time flows very smoothly into the third of the set of three reasons. They're kind of all interconnected, and that's your well-being. Your well-being. It's not hard to see how the scholar who's exhausted and burned out, as an example we talked about a second ago, is going to be in a less good place in terms of their mental and even physical well-being compared to someone whose prep is taking a more balanced path and focusing on making the most of a sensible amount of study hours rather than squeezing out far too many study hours and ending up compromising on the time we need to take care of ourselves, not least sleeping well, eating well, exercise and more. Those smarter study strategies bring calm and confidence to the overwhelmed scholar. You feel you're making faster and better progress. It all starts to feel more doable, and that can do wonders to those spiking pre-exam stress levels. So it's a pretty compelling set of reasons. You will do better with the same or perhaps even less study time, and you'll feel calmer and more in control along the way. But even with these big three and, as I say, very compelling reasons to study smarter, when I teach the principle of effective learning and how to apply them, I often find there are some very understandable reasons for skepticism, for doubt about whether they apply to this circumstance or that. And so I think it's worth just taking a moment to explore some of the big reasons, because there'll be people listening to this that are having one or more of those doubts as we explore this episode. And I think it's really helpful to just take a moment to address those. So let me switch gears now and run through some of the more common doubts I hear about the impact of studying smarter, and I'll give you my response. I'll give you my take to each of them. So firstly is the doubt that, I know what works for me. I've found what works for me, and kind of in parentheses, it's not what you're saying. So one of the most persistent bits of advice about good learning techniques is that you've got to find what works for you. It was one of the key lessons I took from advice I had at school about how to study. But I honestly believe that advice has now had its day. I think we can do a lot better than telling students to simply go off and experiment and find what works for you with no further guidance than that. And that's because, since I was at school over the last decade or two, through the first couple of decades of the 21st century, a quiet revolution has been taking place, initially in the lab and in what scientists understood about how the brain learns. And then that revolution has been catching fire among kind of mainstream education practice and is increasingly widely talked about in the education community among educators and teachers. The science is clear. There are simply some approaches to learning that will be more effective for everyone and others that will be less effective for everyone. And the science is also clear, slightly more subtly, that our own intuitions about what's working for us or not can sometimes lead us astray. In other words, we might think or perceive something is helping, but in practice, the impact is perhaps a little bit less than we'd perceived. So I always recommend caution if we're feeling adamant that a totally different approach to learning compared to what the science says and what we teach on the podcast is serving you better than what science would recommend. That's not to say you don't have choice. You absolutely do have choice. You absolutely still can express preference, because there are various options for effective learning strategies to choose from. There are lots of different variants on how you can put the best practice into action. And by all means, experiment and find the best, most effective approach for your needs and your preferences. That's absolutely fine. So number 2 is, I'm already getting good results. Why should I do anything differently? So sometimes I'll meet scholars in the course of doing my work who are getting really good results with less effective learning techniques. So are they proving the science wrong? Are they the exception to the rule? Do the ineffective techniques really work for them after all? In short, my answer to that is no. Like, everyone is better off using more effective techniques. And even if you're already getting good results, then switching to more effective techniques can still have big benefits for you. You may find you can perform even better with more effective strategies. You may find you can get the same results in a more time-efficient way, and so you save yourself learning time. And if nothing else, then you're preparing yourself for future steps on your academic journey. So it may be that, you're a student at school or high school, and you've never really been stretched or challenged by the work you're set at school. If you're fortunate enough to be in that position, and you may be someone that can kind of get away with any old learning strategy, even not a particularly effective one, up to a certain point. But there will come a point on your academic journey when those less effective strategies stop working for you as well as they have in the past. You stop kind of getting away with the less effective approach and have quite a nasty bump in the road in many cases, when you suddenly find yourself studying, medicine at Oxford or law at Harvard, only to discover that your old habits of, making notes or rereading just isn't cutting it anymore, and you're facing a scramble under pressure and being behind to apply new systems and catch up. It's far better to get in those good habits that will serve you well for the rest of your academic journey while you're not under pressure. So the sooner, the better. Number 3, I'm an auditory or visual learner. Will your strategies work for me? So the learning styles model, as it's known, the visual, auditory, kinesthetic theory, VAC model, V-A-K, VAC, was an incredibly popular idea in the education world over the past sort of 20, 30 years or so. And the big idea was that everyone has their preferred modality. Either you're a visual learner or an auditory learner or a kinesthetic learner, which means you kind of learn through structure or movement. And when information is presented in your preferred modality, it sticks better. Or so the idea went. But the thing was, this never came out of science. This never came out of the world of psychology. And indeed, a generation of cognitive psychologists has been diligently searching for evidence to support the idea that this might actually be a way to help people learn more effectively. And we just simply have not found the evidence for it. We've tried lots and lots of different ways of putting this to the test experimentally, and it's just not true. While it's true that people may be drawn to one mode or the other, and certainly have preferences, there's lots of people listening to this, I'm sure, will feel they have a preference to learn visually or a preference to learn in a kind of audio medium. There's just no evidence that if we learn in our preferred modality, you learn faster and remember more. That said, if you feel you enjoy your work more in a preferred modality, then by all means lean into that. And given certain kind of visual or processing needs, there may be strong arguments to go for different modalities. If your brain, for example, processes written language very more slowly than the kind of neurotypical brain, then that could be a strong argument to work in an auditory medium. So there are kind of exceptions to this, and it kind of sort of almost common sense, really. Like if it's going to take you a very long time to read something, then you might spend more time in your learning using kind of auditory systems. But this idea that every single person on the planet can be neatly bucketed into visual or auditory, and if you're visual, you need to do all your learning in the visual medium. That's just not really borne out by the experimental evidence. So this leads me nicely on to number 4. I'm a neurodiverse learner. Will your strategies work for me? So the short answer is yes. Whether you have dyslexia, autism, ADHD, or any other neurodiversity, and we've covered many of these on the podcast in specific episodes in the past, really interesting conversations with some experts in their fields. But the basic principles of learning effectively will work for your brain too. That's not to say we won't have adaptations. There can be some adaptations that can be really helpful, and I'll mention some of them in the course of the next few episodes when we get into the course over the episodes to come on how to learn effectively in practice. But broadly, the core principles at the heart of effective learning are so fundamental that they cut across all brain differences. Number 5. This is all very well for strong scholars, but I'm not very good at school, so all this isn't really for me. Again, the research I've seen suggests that, if anything, effective learning techniques have an even bigger benefit for those scholars who otherwise struggle relative to their classmates. Learning to learn effectively is a key part of how you swim rather than sink, and maybe even helping you catch up with your peers. In at number 6, I already know this. So the fundamentals I teach are increasingly well understood by many education professionals and increasingly widely communicated to students in turn. And at the heart of it, many of my favourite strategies I teach are not new. If you've got an absolute pile of stuff to learn, flashcards are an incredible tool. And pretty much everyone listening to this will know what a flashcard is, and most of you will have experience using them, either old school paper flashcards or via digital tools. There is nothing revolutionary about recommending flashcards. I get that. But what is revolutionary is the fine detail in how we actually put that idea into practice. I've heard many, many versions of the following story of someone being invited to watch an elite athlete training and wondering, oh gosh, what are the kind of super advanced kind of training drills that this athlete is using to be kind of at the absolute top of their game, world class in their field. Maybe they're a renowned footballer or a basketball player, for instance. And then they're surprised to see that the drills that they're doing out on the pitch or out on the court at 5 a.m. in the morning every day are the exact same drills that every school coach in the land gets their kids to do too. It's not the drill itself that's different. It's the way it's executed, the precision, the detail. That's what makes the difference. There's a school that I've worked a fair bit with over the years who has a watchword of world-class basics, which I just absolutely love because it sums up a lot of my philosophy too. World-class basics. We take the basic idea of flashcards in this example and focus on really world-class execution. Time and time again, I've seen that to be the route to exceptional results in a time-efficient way. The sorts of things people sometimes expect I'll teach, very often they're kind of looking for some kind of fancy silver bullet mnemonic strategy, or they've heard about mind palaces, and it's almost like magical sounding memory tools. And look, if you're trying to memorize a deck of cards in 10 seconds or a 200-digit number string, by all means, go and learn fancy mnemonic strategies and mind palaces and the like, and go and get yourself a world record time in a memory championship. That'd be a lot of fun, I'm sure. But while these kind of sort of memory feats are, amazing and incredible feats, academic learning is a totally different beast in terms of kind of the nature of the learning. And I struggle to think of examples in the literally thousands I've worked with in depth who have achieved academic success by majoring on these kinds of kind of almost magical seeming silver bullet type strategies. So my advice, stick to the basics. Do what's been proven to work, but focus all your efforts and energies on making that execution really world-class. And then finally, number 7, I don't have time to learn about learning more effectively. I feel I'm so swamped with all my academic work. I just don't have time to spend on learning how to learn more effectively. So rounding out the set, my main thought on this is to go back to the quote, which is popularly attributed to Abraham Lincoln, which is, if you gave me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. So by taking our time to prepare our tools, we can fly through a task far more easily, efficiently, and in the case of chopping down a tree, safely. The work we do here on the Exam Study Expert podcast is axe sharpening for your exam prep. Taking a little time to acquire a little knowledge can have a big payoff for the pace at which you zoom through your learning goals to come, helping you maximize your performance in your academic goals, helping you do that in the most time efficient way, and helping you have the calmer, more in control, less stressful route to success. And as ever, if you enjoy the Exam Study Expert podcast and are looking for those best results in your exams in the most time-efficient way, the door is open to you. The invitation is open to come work with me one-on-one to help craft a plan that is perfect for your circumstances. Whether you're brand new to the world of learning effectively or a seasoned pro looking for some little hints and tips, the work I do is perfect for anyone who is serious about success in their exams at any level. I pour my heart into the podcast, and if you're a regular listener to coming to me for coaching, we can often skip through the fundamentals if you're already familiar with them from the podcast, and we'll get into some of the more nuanced conversations about how they apply to you and which tools will really unlock taking your study strategy to the next level. So to fix an exploratory chat, no cost to you, and to meet each other and have a relaxed chat about how you're getting on and how I might be able to help you, head to examstudyexpert.com/coaching. Or if you're a parent listening to this and have a student at home, do head to the same place and we can have a conversation about how I might be able to help your son or daughter. And with that, we're a wrap for today. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. It's great to be back podcasting with you, and I will look forward to seeing you next time for part 1 of the all new and updated and now rather long awaited, it's been a few weeks since I first teased it, all new and updated How to Study Effectively series. It should be a good one. In the meantime, wishing you every success, as always, in your studies.